Welcome back to Getting a Scout 155 Water Ready, Part 2. In Part 1, we brought the boat home, went through everything it came with, and gave it a deep clean, while getting a better idea of the boat's systems and some of the issues we'll need to address. If you haven't seen that one yet, check out Part 1 on my channel. In Part 2, we're going to start digging a little deeper. We'll begin checking and servicing the engine, electrical, and fuel systems, cleaning things along the way, and figuring out exactly what this boat is going to need to get back on the water. We've got plenty to figure out, so let's get into it. Alright, I got the boat pulled in the garage here, and before I do anything that involves spinning the motor over, I want to go ahead and check the lower unit oil. If you start spinning it over and it has water in it or anything, it can make it get all milky and whatnot, so let's check that. Alright, no, that looks very new and no water at the bottom, so that's good to see. I hooked this battery back up. I just have the main two battery cables going to it. There's a bunch of extras here, which I'm guessing are for accessories. I know the trim works. Let's make sure the ignition works and the motor still turns over. All right, that's good. I am seeing some two-stroke oil down here in the bottom cowl of the motor. Hopefully it's just residual, but I'm gonna wipe it up and see if it reappears. Could be leaking from any of these oil hoses, but I'll see if it comes back. Coils and boots all look good. Here are 3 plugs. They look relatively new and don't show any signs of too rich or too lean mixture. I'm gonna go ahead and run the bore scope in these cylinders, see how we're looking. All right, here is top cylinder. So I wouldn't really call that cross hatching. I don't know what kind of texture that is, but I don't see a lot of scarring vertically, and the ports look okay. Pistons, have some carbon on them, but so if anyone wants to give input on how these cylinder walls look, I don't really know. This hasn't been ran that much recently, so maybe it just has some buildup or rust on the walls. Here is the middle cylinder. Looks about the same. And bottom. All right, now for a compression test, I'm going to hook up my little button here to the starter solenoid so I can crank it from the back. All right, this is a disclaimer to everybody before I do this. This is a cheap Harbor Freight compression test kit. It does read low. I've tested it against like Snap-on gauge kits, and the low reading doesn't really concern me. I just want them to all be consistent. All right, here goes top cylinder. All right, here are our results in PSI. So cylinder 1, 75, cylinder 2, 80, cylinder 3, 73. You can see the plugs along with it. The biggest difference is between 2 and 3, being 80 and 73, and that is a 9.15% difference. So usually if it's within 10%, it's good to go. I'm going to run the motor and then probably recheck this. But like I said, this gauge does read low. So if I had to guess, this is closer to 100, maybe a little bit over 100. All right, next I'm going to check for spark. I'm going to use the timing light. I'm not necessarily checking the timing right now. One thing I recommend if you're going to be working on outboards and two-strokes is get a timing light that has a two-stroke mode in it. If you're trying to use a timing light that's only for four-stroke, it's going to be hard to set the timing because you're only going to get spark once every 2 revolutions, where on a two-stroke it's sparking once every revolution. So you can do the math and all that, but it's nice to be able to set it in two-stroke mode and not have to worry about it. I don't know how that's going to look on video, but we have a nice healthy spark on all 3 cylinders. Just good to check before going to run it. All right, I want to get a sample of this fuel out of here before we go running it too much on it. Smells okay. I'm going to try the old Harbor Freight jiggler pump here. I don't know if it's going to reach down low enough to get into that fuel, but we'll see. Sounds like it hit something there. All right, we'll get that in there. It's trying to come up. That did not work great, but I got a little bit, and it looks like that is pre-mixed. So we're gonna have to check on the oil injection. I don't want to be double oiling it. Maybe the oil injection is not working. Yeah, okay. We do have probably like half a tank of this, so I'll have to investigate more, but there is oil in the oil injection system. I'm just going to use the hand bulb for now because I don't have a electric fuel pump to pump any of this fuel out, and I don't want to use the one on the motor, so. Yes, I'm pretty sure this is pre-mixed, judging by how blue that is, but I don't see any water. Doesn't smell horrible. Good morning, everyone. So where we left off, we were cleaning the fuel water separator. It wasn't too dirty, but it did have some rust inside of it, so I decided to go ahead and get Amazon overnight a couple new filters. So let's go ahead and get this cleaned up and put back together. I don't know if y'all could see that on video, but I got the system primed and we have a leak from this secondary fuel filter, it looks like. So let's take some stuff apart and get to that. Yeah, so it looks like it's coming from the O-ring around this actual filter housing. So let's take that apart and check it out.
Yes. This is salty.
Here's some of the stuff that came out of there. Not too dirty. That was in the actual bowl in here. So I'm gonna get it cleaned out. It wasn't super tight, so I'm just gonna clean it, grease this O-ring, and we'll put it back together and see if it leaks. All right, got that back together. I'm gonna go prime it and we'll see if we're leaking. All right, that looks good. I do have a small leak over here by the bulb, but that's easier to fix later. We actually have a tiny leak from around this hose. I think it's these clamps are worn out. And it's actually air coming out, but I'm gonna take the metal clamps off like they did here and just zip tie it and see if that's any better. All right, got that where I'm happy with it. Let's go ahead and degrease this while we have the oil tank off. So from what I can tell, everything for the factory oil injection system is hooked up. Looks like everything's in good shape. So when I get it running, I'm gonna verify if it is oiling through that system. And then if so, we're gonna have to decide what to do about the premixed gas in the tank. I have a small leak right here when I get this primed good, so I'm just gonna go ahead and replace this. I think I have one. Look in my random outboard container. Yep. I think this is an Amazon special, but will work for now. Knew that was coming. I'm gonna cut these back and just get some fresh rubber to clamp onto. All right. So make sure you get the flow right on this, so arrow going this way. All right, and that is good. I don't like this style with these like spring clamps on here, but I might order a better OEM version. All right, let's hook up some water to this engine. Let's verify we're charging. No, I don't think so. So it actually died off camera. I think the voltage got too low because I was watching it drop. So I'm gonna hook up the jump pack and see if that helps. All right, I got the jump pack hooked up. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna turn the jump pack off and see if any RPM will bring our charging voltage up. I don't know if you could see on that video, but it looked like that flywheel was wobbling and I was hearing like a little tapping noise. So let's pull off this cover and make sure it's tight. All right, let's pull this flywheel off and see if there's any reason why it might be wobbling. All right, so I've inspected the flywheel. Everything looks good there, and so does the crank. So I'm just gonna make sure everything's clean and put it back together and torque it and see if we're still got wobble going on. I used a Scotch Brite pad and some PB Blaster and just tried to clean up that mating surface. I'm gonna do the same thing on the crank, and we'll see if we can get seated down there any straighter. All right, I was able to get that nice and cleaned up, hopefully not messing with any clearances. So if anything, at least the flywheel will come off easier next time, because looked it up and you're not supposed to put any C's on these. Well, maybe I was just imagining things, but I think it looks a little more stable. And then also, it didn't really come through on camera, but when I revved it, it seemed to stabilize. I don't know, maybe that's just something these motors do, but I just wanted to make sure the crank wasn't bent or anything crazy, and it looks good. When I brought this home, the trim down was kind of intermittent, but now it literally just clicks. Trim up is fine. So I went ahead and ordered a trim solenoid. These are combined, so it has trim up and down. Google wasn't really sure if the factory one was rebuildable, but I'll probably take the factory one apart and see if I can get that working too. So before I took everything apart, I wanted to see if I could bring this factory one back to life. The old hammer trick works again. Well, for about 25 bucks, just keep this as a spare. I have what I think to be one of the oil injection lines unhooked. So on this top carb, there's a nipple right here. This line has a check valve in it, and the fuel are down lower. So I think this is oil injection line. It does look, it's hard to see, but it looks pretty dry in there. So I don't think it's running, but I'm gonna start it up and we'll see if we get a trickle or anything. I also need to check the voltage. I need to run it up at a higher RPM and idle and see if it's charging, because basically last time it was just staying around 12.8, which isn't the worst voltage, but if it needs to be charging at 13, 14, then it's definitely not doing that from what I've seen. So this appears to be working fine. We'll circle back to this. Back to our charging problem. I did a lot of this troubleshooting off camera because it was annoying and I had to keep looking stuff up. These green wires that go into this plug are the output of the stator. I tested that while running, and on this it is a AC output, and that is going up with the RPM, so that looks good. And then that leads us to our rectifier regulator. So this, while running, should be putting out 12 volts or greater. When I tested it while running, it was only putting out 9 volts. And I was testing off of this plug, which I think is like a diagnostic plug for the motor. So I'm gonna swap this out. I have a new one right here. Let's get it swapped out and see if that fixes our charging issue. While I have this bracket off, there's a couple wires that have chafed through the outside here. I'm gonna wrap those up with electrical tape. Everything is back together, so let's fire it up and see if we have voltage. Well, it looks like our charging issue is fixed. It also cranked up and seemed to idle better with that higher voltage. So at this point, I'm ready to take this motor on a test drive. There's a few other things I'm gonna wrap up on the boat. Just testing out some of the electrical stuff like bilge pumps and whatnot, but all right, not as bad as I thought under here. I'm gonna get some of this junk cleaned out, but now we have good access to our tank, which is plastic, so that's good to see. And we have 1 bilge pump and I think 1 live well pump. So let's get this cleaned out. All right, I'm gonna hook up the wires that were originally here. Let's check these fuses. That one looks good. And so does that one. All right, now when I turn the key on, I do have a fuel reading. The tach is on, but that's been on before. Let's try some of these switches. Nothing, that's a 3-position switch. That's a 2-position, I hear something. I don't know if that's the bilge or the live well pump. Turn that off. I don't hear anything on that one. And I don't hear anything on that one. I'm gonna turn these two back on and we'll see if we have any lights. Well, no bow lights at least. All right, let's find out which pump works. It says on that blue one there that it is automatic. So if we put some water in here, that might kick on if the float's working. So let's see. All right, automatic pump's working. I figured out that one working switch is the manual switch for the bilge pump. So with that, I think we're looking pretty good. I just redid the compression test. I did cylinder 3, which was 73, and now it's looking like it's right at 80, so that's a decent improvement. I used the borescope again, and the cylinders looked a little bit cleaner. Some of that surface rust was gone, but still had the same texture on the walls. So anyway, seems healthy enough to me. So I decided what to do about the oil injection issue. Now that the fuel gauge is working again, and I can also see the fuel level, of course this is tilted back with the jack to the water wheel drain, but it is around half a tank. Half a tank of premix. If I dilute that with half a tank of straight gas, that shouldn't really hurt anything on the motor. I was considering deleting the oil injection and just running premix, but from the research I've done, these Yamaha oil injection systems are pretty bulletproof, so I don't really want to do that right now. If it gives me problems, I'll look into deleting it, but for now it'd be convenient not to have to mix gas. So yeah, it won't hurt it to run some premix and the oil injection. A downside that I didn't really think about before, but deleting the oil injection and going to straight premix, the motor is getting whatever mixture you put in that constantly. So if you do 50-to-1, it's getting 50-to-1 at idle, it's getting it wide open throttle. The oil injection is easier on the motor because at idle, for example, it might only give it 100-to-1 because it doesn't need that extra oil in there, and that will lead to, you know, just better, smoother running, less fouling plugs, less carbon deposits and all that. So that's what we're going to do on that. Follow along to see how it goes. Thank you to everyone for checking out part 2 of working on this boat. Stay tuned for part 3 because we'll be taking it out on its first test drive, installing some awesome upgrades, and of course doing more maintenance, because that's the life of a boat owner after all. See you next time.